Welcome to American Christian or Christian American. I'm Sean Legacy and I'm your host. If you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe and join us as we're trying to build something here, talking about history and talking about how we can come together. If you like this video, please press the like button. The title says injustice is planned, and so resistance must be planned as well. It didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what it's saying. Part of the problem is that too many people live in their own reality. All of us can live in their own reality if we don't reach out of it. So many people don't know what's going on with other people because they don't associate with other people. Oh, yes, Caucasian people or white Americans meet black people at work or different things. But when it comes right down to it, they deny, too many of them deny all the injustices that are going on. How do I know this? Well, slavery was a long time ago. It's over. They just need to get over it. That tells me right there they have no clue as to what's going on in this world, or they simply don't care, and that's a way of just blowing it off. Everybody had slavery. Well, there was slavery in many different fashions throughout the world, but nothing compared to chattel slavery in the United States. Oh, and anything else they called EI, discrimination against white people. They have no clue. It isn't discrimination against white people. All it did was give African Americans a fair shot at getting an interview, getting into the possibility of getting to school. They still had to study and they still had to pass tests like everybody else. And many times, because of the obstacles put up against them, they had to fight much, much harder. So we're going to talk about a few things today. I've got a few videos to share. We're going to start on one that is centered around Louisville, Kentucky. Although Louisville, Kentucky is not the only one by far to have these particular problems. It is centered there and where I am at. So let's look at that video and then we'll talk some more.
Did you know Louisville's banks once decided where black families were allowed to live and where they would never build wealth? In the 1930s and 1940s, federal housing maps labeled parts of Louisville as hazardous. Those areas were outlined in red, places like Russell, Parkland, and the West End. If you lived inside the red line, banks wouldn't lend to you. Not for a home, not for repairs, not for expansion. It didn't matter if you had a steady job. It didn't matter if you paid your bills. If you were black or lived near black families, the answer was no. Meanwhile, white neighborhoods outside the red line received low-interest loans, federal backing, and long-term mortgages. That's how wealth was built. That's how opportunity multiplied. Louisville didn't just segregate housing. It engineered inequality. And here's the part people miss. Those red lines didn't disappear when the maps did. They hardened into property values, school funding gaps, and neighborhood neglect that still shape Louisville today. Banks called it risk. The city called it growth. Black families called it what it was, exclusion. Because when Louisville talks about generational wealth, it rarely admits this truth. Some families were given the tools to build it, others were deliberately locked out. And that wasn't an accident. It was drawn in red.
So here we have banks and other institutions redlining certain districts within Louisville, meaning this is where African Americans live. They called it high risk. They wouldn't give them loans, made it much more difficult for people to establish themselves. Partly, this is the way you create generational wealth. But the white neighborhoods were given low-interest loans, able to establish homes, able to pass things on to their children. While parts of Louisville were run deeper and deeper into economic decline and also opportunities. This was a joint effort between the federal government, the local governments, and banks and other things to control the situation. It hasn't stopped, especially in Louisville. Louisville is a very racial segregated city. It doesn't mean that some African Americans haven't moved out of these zones and been successful, because there have been some law changes that make it more difficult for people to do that. However, the effects are still there. People remain poor. And even today with public transit is a way that can help people, or it can, if it's not there, it can hurt people. And with over several years since I've been here, Louisville's public transit system has been in decline, partially because of the fact that they have been very, very poor service. People never knew if it was going to be there. Uh, Buses run late all the time because of the way the things are set up, the schedules, and the way they respond to things breaking down. So, of course, more people are going to get cars, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can afford it. Some of them are struggling already and they have to get cars that may break down, but they can't rely on public transit. So ridership numbers have gone down, and now they're redesigning the system to be a smaller system in response to ridership in decline. When really, this is just part of a system that continues to try to make things more difficult for African Americans. They don't want to raise the funding. They say they want to increase ridership. Well, maybe the outfit does, but at the same time, do the powers that be who run it, do they? I question this because all of the things that go on in this country, all the things that go on in Louisville, are racially motivated. They may be able to have to go with certain laws, but they are racially connected, and throughout this country, it continues to be so. You say, well, that's not true, that's not true. Yes, it is. Look at the Trump administration. It has been the worst time for African Americans in the past 100 years for going backwards. Now, civil rights, of course, things were worse then, but we are going backwards extremely quickly because of racist individuals who are running the government. And they have plenty of support. MAGA is strong. Make America great again. Make America great to what? They want to make America more white controlled again, more white dominant, more white supremacist. They want to have the wealth to themselves. They want to keep people down. This is what America was built on. This was not built on freedom. You could say it was built on freedom for some at the expense of freedom for others, and that's not real freedom. It was built on the backs of slaves. It was built on the stealing of the Native American lands. It was built on war that drove Mexican people off land that the United States wanted and pushed them down deeper into what we know as Mexico today. That's not freedom. That is war and conquering. Conquering for the conquerors, those to whom they deem to be the rightful heirs of it. And really the thing is, Caucasian or white people in this country are very confused about it because guess what? Most Caucasian people in this country, they don't care about you either. The rich and powerful don't care about you, but they use you like puppets. Because if you stand with them, even though they're ripping your pockets off, they're stealing money from you by keeping your wages as low as possible, by only rewarding some people, then you'll stand with them in this idea of white supremacy and dominate other people. Not only that, you'll be busy fighting with other people, and so therefore you won't pay attention to how they're stealing you blind. How your health care, who they say is the best health care in the world, which it's not, they say that you're getting such a good deal while your co-pays continue to rise, while your insurance continues to cover less items. And the whole reason we don't have universal health care, the main reason is because they didn't want black people to get it and they wanted them to die off. And so here we are believing a lie that screws us, hurts us just as well. All right. Now, I don't refer to myself as white. I used to. I hate the term white. I'm Caucasian. I'm a lighter skinned person, but I'm still a brown skinned person because all of us are. Some of us are on the lighter side of brown skin. Some of us are on the extreme dark side of brown skin, but we're all within the same type of people. Just a variance on the shades of our skin tones. You see, the term white is a social construct. The same as race is a social construct. It is an idea created to divide people and to conquer people, to control people. The idea that certain people are classified as white, meaning other people are classified differently, and they can say white people are superior. When we were in Europe, we weren't white. We were Germans and English and Irish. This is a quote from Tim Wise. And we were fighting and killing each other. We didn't refer to ourselves as white until we found somebody else to kill. And that's pretty much what he said. Tim Wise, great historian and a person who's fighting for racial justice in this country. All right, so let's look at something from Tim Wise. Let's add to this narrative here.
If you don't understand the history of law enforcement misconduct in black space, in black communities, Black Lives Matter won't make any sense to you. Now, I want to be very clear when I talk about the history of law enforcement misconduct. I'm not talking about every damn cop. I'm not talking about good cops and bad cops, good people and bad people. I'm talking about a history and a culture of law enforcement that has simply not treated black and brown peoples the same as white folks. And anyone who denies that what I just said is true has not studied history and is not competent to speak about it, right? Because the history of policing traces directly back to slave patrols. That was the first iteration of law enforcement on this land in any real formal sense. It was police, after all, who enforced the slave codes. It was police who enforced segregation after slavery was ended. It was police who conspired to engage in lynchings of thousands of black bodies, releasing suspected criminals or people who weren't even suspected of a crime into the hands of the mob. It was police that pulled protesters off of sit-in stools in the 1960s. It was police that turned water cannons and dogs on children in the streets of Birmingham. It was police that did the same and beat protesters on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. It was cops, along with uniformed military personnel, that rampaged in Mexican-American communities in Los Angeles during the Zoot Suit riots in 1943. That was law enforcement. It wasn't just average people. It was people whose job was to, quote unquote, enforce the law. The problem is, if you live in a society where the laws are unjust, everyone who enforces those laws is engaged in injustice by definition, you see? It's not about good people and bad people. It's about if a system is flawed, the people who enforce that system are culpable. And people of color know that, right? Black folks know, for instance, and brown folk know that it's law enforcement that enforces the war on drugs, which is not about drugs. And we know it's not about drugs. Two reasons that I know it. Number one, the data tells me. What does the data tell me? Every source you want to consult says that white folks use drugs and sell drugs and possess drugs at least as often, if not more often, than black and brown folks do, right? Just as likely to possess, just as likely to use, just as likely to deal. But who gets arrested? We know it's black and brown folks 5 times more likely on average to be incarcerated for drugs. African Americans 4 times more likely to be busted for weed than white folks, even though usage rates for weed are virtually identical. So that's one way that we know it's not about drugs, that we know it's about controlling certain people. And if police are the ones doing that, then why are we surprised that black folks are cynical about policing, right? Why is that shocking? It shouldn't be. The other reason I know the war on drugs is not about drugs is that I'm standing here. And here's what I mean by that. If the war on drugs were actually about drugs, I don't know who'd be giving this talk, but I know it sure as hell wouldn't be me.
So we look at here what Tim Wise was saying. Policing. Now, what does that have to do with redlining? Well, really, I think it has everything to do with redlining because it's another way of control. So policing in this country, well, we think, oh, the police are very important. And I'm not saying that they're not. But the system of policing didn't start with protecting people, unless you're talking about protecting people's wealth and power and control. It started with the slave patrol to keep people in line. How dare you get out of line? We're going to murder you. We're going to take you back. You're going to be tortured. We may chop off part of your foot so you can't run away so easily. All these horrible things. And they had the right. They used the Second Amendment, which was created basically for the slave patrol, and not what people say. It was created for slave patrol, so they had the right to shoot the runaways. And this put fear in other people that they couldn't run and survive. They would be slaughtered. They would be killed. And so the police force then, it grew bigger and it became more what you know as a police. But during Jim Crow, they enforced Jim Crow laws. They kept people segregated. They kept people, if you went into a restaurant where you weren't supposed to be, it was for whites only, the police would arrest you or take you away. If you drank out of the wrong drinking fountain, if you tried to vote, all of these things, the police were responsible for enforcing these Jim Crow laws. But it's all over, right? No, it's not. Reagan started more too, and not that they even quit before Reagan. Reagan started the war on drugs, and to continue on with Bush, the war on drugs. The war on drugs is not about drugs. The war on drugs is about uh, keeping black people down, keeping non-whites down. Because guess what? White people use drugs as well, but black people are 5 times or even more likely to be arrested for using drugs than a white person is, and they are much more likely to get a prison sentence much more longer than a white person does if they are both given a sentence. The prisons are made up huge population of African American, especially African American men. In fact, more so than there was ever in slavery. And so, yet, we think the war on drugs is about drugs. It's not. There are many instances where white people even use more sometimes. But we also have laws like crack cocaine laws, crack and cocaine. When more often white people use the powder cocaine, but it's more expensive than crack. They're the same drug, have the same ill effects, and yet the sentencing for crack is much higher. Why? Well, as it happens, powder cocaine tends to cost more, and because African Americans have been kept down financially more, they tend to use more crack. Does it mean the whites don't use crack? No. But again, it's a law that is channeled to oppress people, to keep people down. What would this be a benefit to the white population? Well, one thing it does is when they're arrested and convicted under these laws, in most areas they lose the right to vote. Some places they never can vote again. So that gets their opinions, their political power out of the way. That keeps more white people who will be more oppressive in power intact. Like we just recently had a video out where Tennessee was passing a law to make a Charlie Kirk Day, and they sat here and honoring an evil and despicable man who was about dividing people, about degrading people, dehumanizing people, calling black people inferior, which is what we've always done in this country. And yet, the amazing thing to me is when they call black people inferior, Europe, who was illiterate in around the 4th century, was invaded, or Spain was invaded by the Moors, a very dark complected people. They would deny that they were dark complected, but before the 12th century, they were always referred to as dark, really dark complected, reddish brown people. And that they invaded Spain and they established 17 universities, while the whole of Europe only had 3 universities, and they educated not just the Moors were already educated, but they educated the Europeans there. They brought Europe up from illiteracy to much more educated people. They were there for 700 years and had a huge impact, including bringing the current numbering system we use from the Indies and the Arabs, bringing it to Europe. And then Europe, after 700 years of being invaded, even though they were treated better than any other invaded force, overturned the Moors, and they invaded Africa, but they didn't provide education, they took it away. Why? Now we can call them inferior, when they're the ones who came up with the knowledge in the first place. Really, folks, no one's inferior. But if you really want to look at, if there anybody would be inferior, it would be people who look like me. Why? Because we're less genetically diverse. We're still not inferior. But if you're going to have this crazy idea of inferiority and superiority, we're less genetic diverse. The only reason we have different color eyes, I have brown, but I have lighter brown. The only reason I have different color eyes is because low levels of eumelanin. Eumelanin being a derivative of melanin, because there's more than one type of melanin. People don't realize that. But eumelanin controls the darker pigment, while phenomelanin controls the reddish parts of the body, the lips and other areas, and can combine to create ginger hair. So I have lower amounts of eumelanin in my skin and my eyes and my hair. And so the color changes. We don't have different colors of hair because we have more diversity. We have it because we have less melanin in our hair, and so those are the colors that show up. So nobody is superior, but if anybody was to be inferior, it would be us. Now, I don't want you to think I'm saying we're inferior. I'm saying that if you're going to have this silliness of superiority and inferiority, we qualify more so than that. And we only know what we were taught by darker skinned people in this world who were the first, the cradles of civilization, even though we want to lie about it and deny about it. That's why we have to cover up history. It's why we have to lie about history, folks. Okay, so we've got redlining, and those results still exist today. The majority of African Americans in Louisville live in the West End or in what's called the Newburgh area, where some have broken out. But this city continues to fight to make it so they can keep people down. The more they can keep down, the better, the less political power. When someone makes a success of themselves, like John Marshall in JCPS, diversity areas, something goes wrong and they try to degrade them, demean them, and shame them out of their jobs. This goes on all the time. I've heard a lot since I've been here. This is not quit. It's still going on, folks. So we're going to look at one more video here, and we're going to tie it together.
One of the most exhausting things I have to do is to convince my fellow white citizens of what is happening. Every time we have to engage in this haunting public ritual of grieving in public, we got to convince you that it happened. What does it mean that Diamond Reynolds' 4-year-old baby had to muster the resources to comfort her mother in that moment? I'm here, Mama. I'm here with you. What does it mean that Alton Sterling's 15-year-old baby was crying, weeping, because he lost his father, wouldn't see him again? What does it mean that if it wasn't for the footage around Walter Scott, that police officer would still be walking the streets? What does it mean that I have to tell my child?
This man, this distinguished, an educated, intelligent man has to say, every time something happens, we have to struggle to convince our white fellow citizens that it's happening. Why is that? Well, one, we live in a world of lies. We live in a world that's been created to keep us thinking like white supremacists. We can't believe these things are happening because we're taught otherwise. We're taught, one, that African Americans have achieved very little and whites have achieved everything. Like we're taught that Thomas Edison was a creator of the light bulb. He was a creator of a light bulb that did not function well and only lasted a few hours. His associate, Louis Latimer, who was African American, created a light bulb that lasts significant longer with a different type of filament on it, where Thomas Edison used bamboo. He used a filament that would work. It was his light bulb, the African American's light bulb, that was created the great success. Only he didn't get the credit for it. It's in history books, but we don't broadcast that. We broadcast Thomas Edison. So we've been brainwashed over thousands of people who have been creative in this country who are not Caucasian, and we don't want people to know their history. We want people to think that they're uneducated, that they're inferior, that their history starts in this country with slavery instead of being the cradles of the civilization. We don't want people to believe that. So here he is trying to say, we have to fight to convince you that this stuff is happening, because you don't want to believe it's still happening. You don't want to believe that African Americans still have to struggle to get the same opportunities that we do. You want to think that they have the same opportunities. It's just laziness or whatever else that causes them not to do it, or the fact that they just don't have what it takes, when the opposite is true. They have more than what it takes. It's just that we keep putting them down and keeping them down. What's the other reason? Well, we've already said it partly. But we look at an African American trying to tell us these things, and we say, no, that can't be happening. One, it is because we've been pre-programmed to think that the world is like this. But two, it is when we look at somebody like him, we look at his skin tone and we immediately discredit him just because of the color of his skin. It doesn't matter what kind of education he has. It doesn't matter. He's just whining about something that doesn't exist. That's what our mindset is, folks. We think that it was Johnson who said that you can convince the poorest, most uneducated white person that he's better than the most educated African American or black person in this country, you can pick his pockets. The idea you can take money away from this white person because he's so stupid that he believes that he's better than this person over here. But folks, that's exactly what we think. We think that we're better than them. And then guess what? This corrupt society we have picks our pockets. They pay us less in the unions. Just like we are told that it's the Mexicans who are causing us to coming in here, keeping our wages low. Really? If they're all kept out, you think they're going to raise our wages? No, they're not. They're not going to give into it. They want the power and control. We have to join together to fight back. But here we are being so naive and so stupid. When they point the finger at somebody, we like, oh yeah, that's the problem. And we ignore the people who are the problem. Instead of fighting for justice for all of us. Instead of fighting to preserve dignity for all people. Instead of realizing that we stole this land from Native Americans, from Mexican people. Now, maybe they stole it from the Native Americans too. I can't say for sure on all that. But either way, we were definitely the thieves. We don't belong here. When you tell people to go home, we should go home. But Europe won't take us back. They got enough people there. But that's a fact. And we don't think like Europeans do today. We think we're so arrogant. We think we're better than everybody else. But we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for people working for little to no money or no money in slavery to build the wealth of this country. It's been built up on the history of slavery and Jim Crow laws. We have forced people to work for us, and it has enriched corporations to have the power and generational wealth that they can't have so easily. Because why? Because we keep putting them down. A few people have risen above it to create generational wealth. A few. But it is, and you say, well, see, only a few can do it. No. If you had the oppressiveness that African Americans and Native Americans and other people have in this country, if you had to go through all that, you would struggle to death. You wouldn't be successful in this country either. When are we going to grow up? Because really, so many of us as Caucasian people in this country are extremely childish. We think we're selfish. We think only of ourselves. We don't think about other people. And when it comes down to it, folks, it is all our choice. We can choose to remain ignorant and ignore everything and just treat people terrible, or we can choose to learn and be educated and understand and stand up as an individual. Now, being Caucasian is not wrong. I think being white is wrong if you understand what I mean by that, because of it being a social construct. But just the color of our skin, there's nothing wrong with the color of our skin. But neither is there anything wrong with somebody else's skin color either. I can shake my hands, give a hug to my brother. I don't worry about the color of skin. I think about who they are as a person, as a human being. It doesn't matter to me. Why does it matter to you? And if you're a person who it doesn't matter to, good. But if it does matter to you, ask yourself, why does it matter to you? All you are doing really, when it comes down to it, is degrading yourself, because you are living below what you should be. We are not supposed to help and encourage people who are wealthy to steal and to abuse other people. We're supposed to stand together to love each other and care for each other and work hard to build each other up. And when somebody falls, we're supposed to help them up. What will you do? Until the next time on American Christian or Christian American.